How many rap careers end violently? Scott LaRock, Tupac Shakur, the Notorious B.I.G., Big L, Freaky Tah, Jam Master Jay, Soulja Slim, Young Mozzie, Mac Dre, Proof, and just recently on the very same day, hip-hop lost XXXTentacion and Jimmy Wopo. These people are a portion of a long list of artists in the rap music genre who've been killed by way of homicide. Almost all of them were between the ages of 15 and 34. Then you have Rick Ross, Young Dolph, Keek the Sneak, Troy Ave, Benzino, Jada Kid, Rollo, YG, OJ the Juice Man, Bushwick Bill, 21 Savage, King Yella, King Louie, French Montana, Timbaland, Future, Old Dirty Bastard, The Game, Black Youngster, Doe B, Designer, Lloyd Banks, Obi Trice, Fora, Lil J, 50 Cent, Ghostface Killer, Cameron, Waka Flocka Flame, Lil Wayne, Young Dro, Fabulous, and of course others who've all been shot or who accidentally shot themselves but weren't killed. But those were just the guys who had record deals. I spoke to one of my friends who works in the industry, and he pointed out to me that there's a long list of up-and-coming rappers who never got a record deal, who also had been shot and killed before even becoming famous. There's also a fairly long list of rappers who have shot and killed or who have been held responsible for killing other people. Cool C, JD, Slick Rick, Mac, Rod Diggs, Rondo No. 9, Roscoe P. Coldchain, Shaheem, True Life, Ye Jordan, YMCMB Flow, Gucci Mane, Snoop Dogg, Cassidy, C Murder, G Dep, Chi Ali, Max B, and of course there's Obama's pal, Jay-Z, who apparently shot his older brother but didn't kill him. Now I've mentioned this point in several of my other videos, and yet here we go again. Young black males between the ages of 15 and 34 are the only group who have homicide listed as their #1 cause of death in America. Black males make up only about 6% of the U.S. population, but about 50% of the homicide deaths. Everyone seems to have their theories on why this is occurring. On the left, it seems to be due to their having grown up in poverty and past injustices. But at what point do we stop making excuses for this type of behavior? At what point do we have a serious conversation about the deaths of numerous young black males? Now I know that the majority of the black community is made up of law-abiding citizens. The majority of them are doing fairly well for themselves. The problem is that many of us who are doing well are the primary ones who are making excuses for the folks who aren't, and that needs to stop. Also, it should be noted that hip-hop has a following by people of all races. It has become a part of American pop culture, and therefore it helps to add to the true stereotypes of young black males in America. It's probably the most celebrated form of media or entertainment that portrays young black males. Should people be so surprised when these stereotypes stick out in the minds of the large portion of Americans? We all know that this isn't necessarily a race issue, but it is certainly a cultural issue. And if you thought that it wasn't, well, now is the time to consider culture.
How many MCs, how many MCs, how many MCs must I?
By now, most of us are used to the brazen and unapologetic sounds of violence, promiscuity, misogyny, and criminal advocacy on hip-hop records. We've been hearing them for almost 3 decades now. Granted, a lot of it sounds good. When all the violence and criminality began in the genre, there were quite a few folks who led protests and rallied to try and stop it from getting to the saturation point that it's reached today. People like C. Dolores Tucker were harshly critical of the genre and were attacked by several rappers for it.
Images that degrade our dignity and are an insult to our children, our families, and communities concern us too. And that includes all this gangster rap and misogynist lyrics. Music that glorifies and promotes violence with guns, knives, or drugs, and denigrates and defames women.
Dear Miss Dolores Tucker, you keep stressing me Fucking with a motherfucker of mine. I figured you wanted to know, why we call it hip hop.
So if you wonder why we call you, if you wonder why we call you, if.
Eventually, parental advisory stickers, buying age limits, and such were placed on albums. Yet and still, the violence continued to be heard in lyrics in a pattern that only seems to escalate after those early 1990s. The claim by many rappers was that hip-hop and its lyrics were a representation of what was actually going on in black communities. Chuck D from Public Enemy once said that rap is the CNN of young black America. Other terms like reality rap, keeping it real, rose out of that way of thinking.
Niggas love to keep it real dumb.
I can recall that in the documentary, Ice-T talks about his rise to fame. He talks about the hip-hop pioneers and New York MCs who were rapping about going to parties and having fun. But for him and his friends, they were engaging in criminal activities.
But my boys were like saying, Ice, man, why you rapping about parties, man? Y'all, we don't go to parties, we rob parties, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yeah, that is true. Because while they were having a hip-hop scene in New York, we were having a gang scene. Due to the fact they called themselves a gang, people called this gangster rap. Violence is part of that lifestyle, so you have to rap about it.
Now, in discussions with folks about the rap culture of violence and criminality, there's a portion of people who will say to me that it's the record label's fault that hip-hop has become so entrenched in negativity. That these messages are being promulgated by a greedy record industry owned and controlled by whites. The problem with that argument is that the facts do not substantiate that claim. You have another case of people trying to blame others for their own problems. Looking at the history of hip-hop and using Ice-T as a reference, we find that gangster rappers, as they were often called, had big problems breaking into the industry because the record labels did not want to touch them. You can watch the movie Straight Outta Compton and hear about the story of NWA and see that their record label refused to give them any promotion. They sold millions of records in spite of not having the support of the record label, not because the label made a big push to promote their material. And today, you can just go on YouTube to see various unsigned artists with loads of plays on videos that promote all sorts of immoral behaviors and violence. What this shows is that the culture is fascinating and that people are drawn to it. Now, this isn't just something that's a black issue. Back in the days of Jesse James and the Mafia, you had the media of choice at the time, newspapers, who would rush to print the stories about these criminals for the sake of sales. If it bleeds, it leads, they'd often say in the newspaper industry. And we see this in movies as well. Violence and crime sells. Remember how the media used to cover John Gotti? They named him the Teflon Don. It seems that the newspapers loved to put John Gotti on their covers. But even still, many Italians did not like the bad press that mafia movies and front page headliners like John Gotti's and the Paul Castellanos would bring them. The law-abiding Italians made sure to separate themselves from those mafia figures and condemn those cultural stereotypes when they made their way into entertainment. Similar to the Italians, we had the C. Dolores Tuckers and folks who tried to ward off these kinds of images in hip-hop. Unfortunately, they were attacked for it. Instead, many blacks have done their best to shield hip-hop from any amount of criticism. They've made the case that the culture is ours, and therefore it must be protected at all costs. Now, I'm all for the preservation of the art form. I'm often compelled to listen to music that I know has messages that I don't agree with, but I listen anyway due to the fact that it just sounds good. And I probably wouldn't have much of a problem with it if it was more like TV and film where we knew it was just an act. Unfortunately, much of what we see in hip-hop is not an act. This fact should be made abundantly clear looking back at those lists of all those folks who've been involved with shootings or who've been killed. I'd challenge anyone to find a list that long in any other genre of music. It was a conscious rapper, KRS-One, who once said, "Reality ain't always the truth. Rhymes equal actual life in the youth." I don't know about you all, but after seeing so many young male rappers slain by other young black males, I'm quite sick of the actual life of these youths. I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for everyone to start to consider culture. I'm Chi Brown. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please consider donating to my Patreon account. A link will be found in the description of this video. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and beef with me in the comments. And I'm out. No more Yaza Baza.